Welcome back to Blasphemous Nutrition. My name is Aimee, and honey, I got to tell you, it has been hot as Hades this summer where I'm at, and probably where you're at too if you're in the Northern Hemisphere. Recently, a couple of folks were asking me about how to best hydrate in the heat, so clearly it's on a lot of people's minds. Now, hydration is one of those health habits that's really easy to ignore. And fulfilling hydration needs can be both quite simple and a little bit complex. In today's episode, I'm going to break it down for you. How to tell if you're dehydrated, how to ensure you're getting enough water, and the role and importance of electrolytes when considering your hydration needs. Hey Rebels, welcome to Blasphemous Nutrition. Consider this podcast your pantry full of clarity, perspective, and the nuance needed to counter the superficial health advice so freely given on the internet. I'm Aimee, the unapologetically candid host of Blasphemous Nutrition and a double-degreed nutritionist with 20 years experience. I'm here to share a more nuanced take on living and eating well to sustain and recover your health. If you've found most health advice to be so generic as to be meaningless, or so extreme that it's unrealistic, and you don't mind the occasional F-bomb, you've come to the right place. From dissecting the latest nutrition trends to breaking down published research and sharing my own clinical experiences, I'm on a mission to foster clarity amidst all the confusion and empower you to have the health you need to live a life you love. Now let's get started. Signs of hydration appear long before our thirst kicks in. And while hydration itself only becomes a topic of discussion during heat waves, many of us actually live in a chronic state of dehydration all year long and have subsequent electrolyte imbalance, yet we don't realize it. Water does a lot more than just quench thirst. Our bodies use water to transport nutrients and waste, help regulate body temperature, protect our tissues, and support cell growth and communication. Water also cushions our bones and lubricates our joints in addition to quite a bit more. Way before we feel thirst, our body gives us subtle cues that we need fluids and electrolytes. Common signs of dehydration can be general fatigue, but a lot of things cause general fatigue, so we can't say that's exclusively dehydration. Brain fog, poor mood, muscle cramps, even craving sweets can be a sign that you actually need water. These symptoms begin with as little as 2% dehydration from optimal levels. And given that the average adult body holds about 10 to 13 gallons of water, this equates to less than 3 ounces of water loss before symptoms can appear. Now, how much water we need in a day varies significantly from person to person, one's activity level, the ambient temperature where you are, the use of heating and air conditioning, as well as medication use. So this makes it pretty much impossible to give proper, accurate guidance. And while general recommendations like 8 glasses of water a day or half your body weight in pounds consumed in fluid ounces is not grounded in hard science, it does highlight to most of us that we do need more fluids than we often think we do, especially if we're not consuming a diet rich in watery foods such as soups or watery fruits and veggies. Now, my general recommendation is to drink enough liquids that your urine is a pale yellow. If it's dark yellow, orange, or highly aromatic, you're probably dehydrated. That said, there are certain medications, as well as B vitamins, which can alter the color of your urine as well as its odor. So even that recommendation may not apply to you. It's easy to see how even something like fluid consumption can feel complicated and overwhelming. Now, our bodies are made mostly of water, right? And historically, aside from food, we received electrolytes from the water that we took in from streams, rivers, and lakes, as trace minerals were abundant in these sources. But with water filtration and purification, many of these trace minerals are no longer in our water supply, particularly in large cities where there isn't well water usage. So it becomes even more crucial to replace these minerals that have been lost from the water supply through our food. Sodium, potassium, calcium, and magnesium are the electrolytes that the body uses to maintain an appropriate balance of fluids inside the cell versus outside the cell, and also a very necessary requirement for muscle contraction, relaxation, and the electrical impulses that keep our heart beating and our cells communicating with one another. A lack of potassium or magnesium in the diet leads to high blood pressure and muscle cramps, including period cramps and restless leg syndrome. It can also cause headaches and even lead to your heart stopping if potassium deficiency gets too severe. Low sodium is much less common, but it can also lead to headaches, nausea, lightheadedness, low appetite, poor energy, and brain fog, as well as muscle twitching or cramping. Usually, low sodium comes from athletes who are overhydrating with water and not using electrolytes. That's the most common way that people end up with low sodium in the blood outside of like a medication or disease situation. While general guidance on the internet suggests we can get these trace minerals through our food alone and we don't need to worry about it, a closer look at the population data shows that the majority of individuals consume a diet that is piss poor in potassium and magnesium, which I maintain is due to our general aversion or neglect in procuring and eating green veggies. The industrialized Western diet is also high in concentrated foods, which are low sources of water, like bread and pasta and meat. Fruits and vegetables supply a great deal of water as well as electrolytes. And when 70 to 90% of a population is not consuming the minimum daily recommendation of fruits and vegetables, they are going to need to find essential fluids and electrolytes elsewhere. Current data suggests that nearly 50% of American adults and upwards of 20% of adults from the United Kingdom are not meeting their minimum magnesium needs from diet. And less than 2% of Americans meet their potassium needs through diet. So yeah, the industrialized diet does provide ample salt, but it does not supply enough magnesium and potassium to balance out that sodium. And so we have these conditions like fatigue and headaches and lightheadedness, constipation and high blood pressure and muscle cramps, which are considered commonplace and normal by many people. But chronic insufficient intake of potassium is also associated with a higher incidence of heart attacks. And studies also point to those who consume the most potassium from the diet have less heart disease and high blood pressure than those who consume the least. So if you tend to experience headaches, nausea, lightheadedness, low appetite, brain fog, or muscle twitching and cramping regularly, looking at hydration and electrolyte balance really might be a valuable thing to consider. And this is especially true if you are on a low carbohydrate diet, because being on a low carbohydrate diet actually increases your fluid and electrolyte needs. Or if you're taking medications such as diuretics, blood pressure meds, kidney meds, diabetes medications, or laxatives, that can also lead to dehydration and an electrolyte imbalance. Other more subtle signs that you may have increased electrolyte needs are a general love of salty foods, having low blood pressure, or orthostatic hypotension of unknown cause. And orthostatic hypotension, for those of you who don't have it and don't know what it is that feeling when you stand up and you feel a little lightheaded and dizzy, like you're going to pass out. That's called orthostatic hypotension. Having the experience of all of the water you drink going right through you is also a sign that you don't have enough electrolytes, because those electrolytes take the water and put them into the cells. And if there's not enough of them, you're just going to piss all that stuff out, right? Or if you drink water and you feel it sloshing around in your stomach, that is also a sign of electrolyte imbalance. The latter two are directly caused by a lack of electrolytes in your beverage, which prevents that water from being properly absorbed by the cells. Now, anecdotally, I've also noticed that people who avoid drinking water because they don't like it find that adding electrolytes generally makes it more palatable and enjoyable. So that may be something to try if you generally don't care to drink water by itself. When it comes to electrolyte beverages, there are scads of them on the marketplace. You can find them everywhere, even at convenience stores. Many of the most commonly available ones are actually pretty shitty and not appropriate for high levels of activity due to the need for shareholder profits, due to the fact that the companies are favoring taste over efficacy. But if you're sitting on the porch and you're feeling parched, an electrolyte beverage that ends in ADE or AID will probably be just fine for you. On that note, if you prefer to avoid weirdly colored electrolyte beverages, you can make your own by salting your water, adding a touch of lemon juice and maple syrup to it to further encourage mineral absorption into the cell. So one of the things that facilitates electrolyte absorption is a touch of glucose, right? Because the insulin bump that you get from that facilitates moving things into the cell. This is a great way also to make water taste better by adding lemon, salt, and a little bit of maple syrup. And it can encourage hydration while adding a few trace minerals that will facilitate absorption. Coconut water can also be really helpful to replenish electrolytes on a hot day. But coconut water is insufficient if you are highly active. So if you are looking to replenish electrolytes after a workout or to use it during a workout, coconut water doesn't quite have the right balance to meet your needs there. If you're outside in the heat, walking around or working or exercising, something like lemon water or coconut water is likely not going to be effective enough for you. And there are also some people who just simply have higher electrolyte needs that won't find lightly salted lemon water effective enough to alleviate their symptoms. And I'm actually one of those people. In cases such as this, relying on an electrolyte formula that's designed for athletes is a better choice to ensure that you are getting adequately hydrated. Now, with sport formulas, there are many ready-to-drink options, and those that are most accessible do tend to have more sugar in them than is ideal, and this can actually backfire and inhibit absorption of electrolytes into the cell. So if you're grabbing a bottle of an electrolyte beverage, you want to check the label and make sure there is no more than 9 grams of carbohydrate for every 8 ounces of fluid in that bottle. Ideally, that carbohydrate is also going to come from sucrose or glucose. You're also going to want 180 to 225 milligrams of sodium and 60 to 75 milligrams of potassium, effectively a 3-to-1 ratio of potassium to sodium. And this is what the hydration research suggests is the optimal balance with just enough sugar to enhance absorption but not inhibit it. Beverages that are sweetened with maltodextrin or fructose can cause gut issues with some folks and interfere with absorption. So stay away from those if you are looking for an electrolyte beverage during physical activity. You'll also find that most electrolyte beverages lack magnesium. And this is in part because an excess of magnesium can lead to loose stools, and nobody wants that. Given how widely varied the magnesium intake is in an individual's diet, it's definitely not something an athlete wants to mess around with when they're training or competing. There is an electrolyte supplement called LMNT or Element, and it's designed for those who are on a low carbohydrate diet. It does contain some magnesium as well as higher amounts of sodium and potassium to compensate for being on a low carbohydrate diet. And this is my preferred electrolyte support for my low carb folks. It's really wonderful for this demographic. I've also found it useful for people who tend to get lightheaded when they stand up, those with orthostatic hypotension, or individuals with POTS symptoms. Unfortunately, Element does not yet support blasphemous nutrition, but if they want to sponsor this podcast, I am totally open to having a conversation with them. How much and how often you need electrolytes is as variable as the amount of water you should be drinking. The nice thing about electrolytes is that our palate for sodium is pretty well attuned. So when you're in need of electrolytes, that beverage is going to taste like the most freaking amazing thing in the world. But then as soon as your sodium needs get topped off, you'll find that it either tastes too salty or your desire to drink it wanes significantly. Folks who have high sodium needs, regardless of their activity level, will likely find a more concentrated electrolyte like Element to be tasty, while others will find it much too salty. So here, our body is giving us clues about how much is enough as well as too much. On a particularly hot or active day, you may find that you feel your best with more electrolytes than you expect, and that's totally okay. So, as with everything, there are some caveats. There are some medications that alter fluid balance, and electrolytes also alter fluid balance. So you will want to talk to your doctor about electrolyte supplementation if you're taking medication, especially if you're considering regular use of electrolytes as part of your general hydration. The safest way to get our electrolytes is through our food supply. A diet high in vegetables and fruits will supply you with an abundance of potassium and magnesium. I mean, in clinical practice, I see this change alone lower blood pressure, eliminate cramping, low energy, and improve mood, as well as reduce headaches. And the great thing about food, unlike supplements, is that those known electrolytes that we're looking for come packaged with other compounds that support health and proper electrolyte balance, as well as absorption of those electrolytes. Some of these compounds are known and others are yet to be discovered. While there are some foods which can definitely interact with medications, those interactions by and large tend to be less severe than supplements can be. All right, folks, that is a wrap for this week's episode of Blasphemous Nutrition. I hope that you're feeling more inspired to reach for another glass of water, perhaps with a splash of lemon, so you can stay hydrated and energized today. If you've not yet left a rating and a review, know that it would totally make my day if you did. But really, the reviews are not about stroking my ego. They're about making sure people like you who are looking for great podcasts with quality information find what they're looking for. On that note, if you know somebody that you think may be a little bit dehydrated, share this episode with them. They likely don't realize the impact that dehydration has on their day-to-day life, and they'll thank you for cluing them in. Until next time, my blasphemous buddies. Any and all information shared here is for educational and entertainment purposes only and is not to be misconstrued as offering medical advice. Listening to this podcast does not constitute a provider-client relationship. Note, I'm not a doctor nor a nurse, and it is imperative that you utilize your brain and your medical team to make the best decisions for your own health. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked to this podcast are at the user's own risk. No information nor resources provided are intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Be a smart human and do not disregard or postpone obtaining medical advice for any medical condition you may have. Seek the assistance of your healthcare team for any such conditions and always do so before making any changes to your medical, nutrition, or health plan.